Hey guys, what's going on? Happy New Year. We got a plus 23 Dawn of the Infinite Rise. Now, this is listed as the hardest key almost every week for Mythic Plus. So, as usual, I will go through the mechanics of each mob, each boss, and hopefully some tips that might help you out. And I will also go a little bit over what the affixes are. So let's get started. First, it's Fortified, Afflicted, Raging. This is a pretty simple week. Fortified increases the trash mob damage and health, making them a bit more difficult to deal with. Afflicted is these ghost guys that you may have just saw. Basically, you need some sort of disease, poison, or curse to spell, and you can dispel them. So as a shaman, you take poison cleanse or cleanse spirit. As any other, such as monk, you take detox, or mage, you take decurse, I believe. So anything to help out. It's not just a healer mechanic, although you can heal them. It's much faster just to dispel them. And the last one is Raging. That causes units below 30% to become immune to any crowd control effects. So in Dawn of the Infinite Rise, it is a bit more of a hindrance because there are a lot of spellcasters that you have to interrupt, and you don't quite have the interrupts to get all of them. But let's get started on the mobs. This first guy, Valo, he summons a shield barrier. Basically, you just need to move out of the barrier, or move the units out of the barrier, so that way they take normal amount of damage. If they stand in it, they're taking much reduced damage, as well as just doing a small swirlies on the ground. Here we have Laria, or Larry, I don't know how to say that name, but anyways, she's a maiden. She does a pulsate, and then she also does this orb of contemplation, I think. Contemplation, I think it was. Basically, this launches out in a straight line and comes back afterwards, kind of like a boomerang effect. And if anybody, even enemies, are caught within the orb, they take a considerable amount of damage and are stunned for a few seconds. So if you are tanking this, or maybe you are the DPS, try to stand with the mobs in between you and her so they take the damage of the orb. It's very, very helpful. So one thing to look for in some dungeons is just looking for the things to help you out. So the Orb of Contemplation is definitely a huge thing, but you also have to make sure you are not in the way of it when it is going off. Next one is the Serpent guy. So Spurlock. Wow. And once you kill all three named mobs, you can then summon Tier, which is the boss, and start the RP. But onto what he does, basically he charges and creates a dust cloud, and you have to interrupt him before he uses his grasp on somebody and pulls them into the dust cloud. The dust cloud is also line of sight, so you must be careful and make sure you are inside in order to interrupt him. Now, if you have some sort of movement prevention, such as Hand of Freedom or the Death Knight one, which I believe is Death's Advance, you can actually run away from it, but it will not allow you to attack and stuff. You do have to still interrupt. So just make sure you are ready for an interrupt on that. Now, the hardest part about this whole part are these dragon mages that will come up very soon. Basically, they cast a volley effect, and if it's not interrupted, it's almost a group wipe, unfortunately. So you want to make sure you save your kicks for about 30% for when they're enraged, unless you have an Augvoker that can mass remove enrage effects, while using your CC while they are above 30% to make sure none of them go off. So you'll see them pop up here. Here we have Afflicted. I'm just going to dispel. Well, actually, Hawk got it first, so I couldn't get it. But here are these mages. These are the ones that cast the volley here. You'll see it in a moment. Right there, corroding volley. You want to make sure that is interrupted. And if you have DPM, you will have a timer for when they can cast it again. Now, they won't all cast it at the same time. They will be spread out, so be careful of that. Two will not go off at the same time ever. They will always rotate. It's kind of interesting. It does make it much more difficult to deal with as well. Because if you had them all cast at the same time, you could use one stun, get them all, or any form of CC to remove them. But onto the first boss, we are going to skip that trash pack on the right because you technically don't need it. But the mechanics for Tier. The first one is going to be the fact that he puts a magical debuff on you. And what that's going to do is it's going to pulsate damage, and when dispelled, it's going to erupt damage as well. So make sure you slightly spread out. Make sure you are ready for certain mechanics. The next one is going to be Titanic Blow. That is going to be on your tank. And then the next one is going to be a massive AoE cone. You want to make sure you are aiming that towards the outside of the arena, so that way during his intermission phases, you don't have to worry about running through it. And then Dividing Strike here is a group soak. So I'm sure tanks could probably solo it for the most part, but it's best to group soak because I believe it does do AoE damage if not enough people soak it. Now, we're on to his intermission phase. Basically, he has a giant shield. I always take the section where he's at because I like beating him up at the same time as this. But every time you grab an orb, you get a haste buff, as well as if the orb actually makes it to the pillar, it does AoE damage and puts a dot on you, so you have to be very careful. But as you can see here, the phases just repeat. Although the mechanics do go in a different order. As you can see, we got debuff, then a soak, and then we should get the annihilation here, which, oh, he's doing his tank buster. Okay, he does tank buster, and then he'll do his AoE cone, so you want to make sure you're aiming it to the outside like we are, and that way you don't have to deal with it as much. Now, each one of these mechanics does slightly grow, so you want to make sure you're watching your feet. They grow very slowly, but they do grow in size. Here we have another center phase or intermission phase. Again, just grab the orbs, stay close to them if you can, but make sure you're not letting any orbs get to the center, because if one or two get there, it's kind of okay, but if 4 or 5 get there, you're definitely not going to make it through the fight. But yeah. That is it for Tier. He's very straightforward. Definitely, in my opinion, I think he's the second easiest boss. I think Morchi is now the easiest boss. That may not be a popular opinion, but that's my thought on it. I think the hardest boss is probably the battlefield boss, which is the second one, Time Lost Battlefield. That, in my opinion, is the hardest boss in the dungeon. And we'll get to that when we get there. But first, we got these two here. We got a Timeline Marauder, and then we also have a Watchkeeper. Now what's going to happen here is massive AoE. The Marauder is also going to cast a shield effect that you can interrupt, so make sure you get it. Right there, displace thing. And then this big dragon just casts swirlies on the ground. If you get hit by them, you are cursed, stunned, and getting a dot. And then he will pulsate massive damage with this Infinite Fury. So just make sure your healer is either using a cooldown or you are using a defensive. As an shaman enhancement, you can use Ancestral Guidance as a second defensive, or you can use Earth Elemental. The other thing is just make sure your Earth Shield is active at all times. You'll notice that I tend to forget to do that. But here we have the Gauntlet effect, and I didn't get my speed buff, so I instantly died. But you'll see here you have to run through without either touching the mobs. As you can see, if you touch their sand location, it sends you back to the start. You have to dodge orbs, you have to dodge these frontal cones. So it does get to be a pain in the butt. Usually I don't have this much difficulty, but I don't think I made it. I think I gave up after this attempt here. So it is what it is. Sometimes it works in your favor. Sometimes, yeah, I just give up and sit here waiting. They all made it except for me. It's kind of funny, but here we have a double dragon pack. One is going to pulsate AoE like the Infinite Fury, as well as one of them will do a frontal cone on the tank. So you have to be very, very careful. As you can see, Vigrim got aggro, and then he went and wiped us all. I'm not quite sure how Vigrim took aggro. He may have just popped off a little bit too hard, but it's a bit unfortunate. But yeah, that is the mechanics for these guys. He casts Infinite Fury doing pulsating damage. He's going to cast his Tank Buster and hit the tank. So normally you just want to focus one down as fast as possible. Typically you, it doesn't matter which one. I would say the Infinite Fury is better, but in this case we are choosing the frontal guy. I don't really know why we just did. Sometimes it's just better not to think about it and just take one out before it gets out of control. But we are coming up to probably the hardest room in the dungeon. Not necessarily hardest, maybe the most annoying room. This sand location is kind of weird. Basically, every time you take out a mob, it explodes AoE damage and then removes some of the sand nearby on the floor. So you have to basically watch how many you take out at the same time, as well as keep on moving, because it is a gauntlet effect. So these temporal fusions, the big guys there, they don't respawn, but these little gremlin dudes do respawn. Just so that way you don't miss out on getting sand in certain areas. But as you can see, we're slowly creeping up, and then it eventually gets faster as you continue. The bigger the mob, the bigger the sand explosion, so you will have quite the room later on. The reason why it's I'd say probably the most difficult is because of the constant spawning, the constant damage going out, and the mobs are kind of a pain in the butt to work with in a sense. So as you can see, the mage spawned another set of little gremlin dudes, so we go ahead and take them out while taking out these fusions. Now, the little guys don't count for percentage, but these big guys do. And the temporal mages, you have to take all of them out before the portal is spawned. If you try to go in this portal, you'll just have to wait until you clear for the next one, and vice versa. You cannot go ahead without taking out all the mages and actually going up to the portal and activating Chromie there. And in order to activate Chromie, all you do is walk up and then she will appear. You will see here in a second. We get close, and there comes Chromie out of nowhere, starting the portal. And watch out, because those little portal things are definitely annoying. They spawn right under the mage, so be wary. Not like it'll kill you, it's just annoying, especially if you get moved and pull a little bit of crap. It doesn't always work out. But this room definitely sucks. As for that time stream, basically they only have 30%, so they don't last very long, but they will do something called bloom, and that puts a dot on the tank and a dot on a DPS of its choosing. So your healer wants, if you're the healer, you want to make sure you dispel the DPS before you dispel the tank. And its second mechanic is going to be a tank buster frontal cone. So just be wary of where you're facing it. I don't expect it to ever get off the tank buster, so you don't have to worry too much. But as for these mages, you just want to interrupt as much as possible. Doesn't really matter what cast it is, just interrupt it. It can, basically one cast puts a dot on the target, another cast just does flat damage, generally aimed at the tank. So if you're going to interrupt anything, interrupt Infinite Burn. Otherwise, just interrupt all of its casts, to be honest. It's better to interrupt everything than just one thing at a time. So, but as you can see, we take on two of them nice and easy, and then we're making our way to the time lost battlefield. But first, we have to wait for the RP to activate in order for the portal to get through, which is kind of weird. But if you do walk up closer to it, Chromie will spawn and start the RP as well. but we didn't get close enough. Pardon me. So we sit here waiting. If you are in combat, you cannot take these portals, so just keep that in mind. But it is about to spawn, and here we go on the golden dragons. Yay! So this next pack is a pack of three time worm things and a big, I don't know, spore bat looking thing. One does a stun effect that has a swirly on the ground. If you get hit by it, you get stunned for like 30 seconds. Don't get hit by it. Simple as that. The other ones just cast time beam, so you can interrupt that with a kick or a knockup. So choose whichever one you want to use, or you stun it. The big guy you have to interrupt. And I don't know what that was. I think it's a frontal of some sort, maybe. There's no real indicator of it. But both Hawk and Vigrum fell over, so we beat this guy up and then we resurrect them. But onto the time lost battlefield. So the first guy that you fight is going to be the Destroyer. Now its name is kind of misleading because when I hear it, this one is called the Horde Destroyer. And when I think of that name, I think of, oh, it's destroying the Horde, but it's actually the Horde's unit. So, and the reason why we're doing the Horde one is because most of the group is made up of Alliance. It's unfortunate, I know. But yeah. So the first mechanic that this guy will do is bombardment, I think it is. Basically, it's going to choose a target and throw bombs at them. They will spawn to your left and right based on how your character is facing. So picture your character's shoulders, and that's where they're going to spawn, and then a bomb on top of you. So as long as you run in a straight line and then slightly turn very slowly and not erratically, it will always be simple to dodge. Here is Volatile Mortar, here it is. So as you can see, Hawk is kind of spazzing out a bit, and you can see the bombs going all over the place. It's always choosing to spawn them at your shoulders and on top of you, so just keep that in mind when running away. Just a slow run straight and slight turns is great. The second one is to deploy the goblin bombs. Basically, they're just mobs you have to kind of kite and kill. If you are in their, I guess, area of effect when they die, you will take a dot. Now, I don't quite know how I died there. I didn't think that swirly was going to get me, but it did in the end, unfortunately. But Hawk is just going to go ahead and res us. As for the next mobs, we got a pack of 3. We have a Shaman and 2, I guess, warrior types. The small guys will cast something called Commanding Shout, which, as you can probably guess, is going to be a HP increase, or Rallying Shout, my bad. So just make sure you interrupt it, and once the Shaman or the big guy gets low, they will cast, if it's Alliance, it will be Holy Light, and if it's Horde, it will be Healing Wave. Make sure you interrupt it, but it is only like I believe it's like a 30% heal, so it's not the end of the world, but it is a time loss if you let them cast it. So he will cast it here in a moment. As you see, Healing Wave, and we interrupt, nice and easy. Also, I said I was going to get it, and you can see my poison, or the afflicted, and my poison cleanse is on cooldown at the correct time, but one of these golden guys actually took it out. So it kind of, I don't know, but yeah, that happened. But as for this boss, so he has very important mechanics and is a real pain in the butt. So the first one is going to be the tank buster called Decapitate. Basically, it's just a big hit that reduces the tank's healing received by 75%, so keep that in mind when you are a tank. As for the next mechanic, it's going to be Shockwave. Basically, you don't want to aim this towards the middle of the map, because every time a unit falls over, he gains increased AoE damage. What this means is every time he auto attacks, he deals bonus AoE damage, and it will also hurt the group. So keep that in mind. The next mechanic is going to be a Blade Storm. That effect, you actually, what I found works best is you have to run away, but I find kiting it through the mobs helps out a lot. And the reason why is because it actually damages all the golden guys without taking them out too much. And that will help you out later, because when he casts for the Horde, or for the Alliance when it's for the Alliance, it spawns 3 units. Typically, it is 1 Grunt, 1 Axe Thrower or Archer, and then a Warlock or a Mage. Basically, your first target is going to be take out the Warlock, second target is going to be the Archer or the Axe Thrower. The reason why is because those ones hurt like hell. And if they are up, they are going to constantly dot you and spellcast at you, dealing massive amounts of damage. So be wary of that. So here I get targeted by the Blade Storm. And I try and kite a little bit through the golden guys just to get them a bit damaged. So that way when he spawns them, they spawn at low health and not maximum health, making it very difficult for us to deal with. But as you can see, we take him out. And the reason why I say this is the hardest boss is because without a Death Knight, the bonus adds are very difficult to take out. I've had many groups fall apart on that boss just because we are unable to get the adds down fast enough. But here a mistake was made, or not really a mistake, just an unlucky thing. Steven accidentally pulled a set of worms that we wanted to skip. So he stays dead. I run back and resurrect him because I was the first one there. But as I resurrect him, we are going to make our way to Morchi. And now, Morchi was considered the hardest boss in here, but with the way things have turned out and the changes that were made, I think Morchi is actually the easiest boss in this dungeon. And we will get into that once we get there, but first, we have to get through the dreaded orbs of this little platform. And each time you touch one of these orbs, they will create a circle on the ground and will knock anybody that is within the circle, but they do not hurt you if you run through them before the circle. So running through them triggers them. As you will see, I run into them, triggers them, and then they explode after a few seconds. So if you want to knock your friends off, feel free to run into all of them. It's kind of funny sometimes. But our next mob is going to be a Dragonkin. Now this guy is going to summon a bunch of units. One is a bomb runner, one is a rocket thing, and I don't know what the other ones are. But anyways, this guy is going to cast something called Dizzying Sands, just interrupt it. I don't know what it does because I've never let it go off. But he's also going to do something that buffs a unit. You can purge it off with Arcane Torrent or Purge if you have it. So keep that in mind. Arcane Torrent is preferably. But there is Rocket Volley. And this Millennium Aid you can purge off and it removes the cast. You cannot interrupt it. And as for that big rocket ship, he does something called Carpet Bomb, I believe it is. Basically, he's going to summon a bunch of bombs underneath him, so be wary of that. I think we... No, okay, we run away. So bombing run. So that you have to be wary of as a melee unit. But onto Morchi we are. So the first mechanic is going to be more problems, and what that's going to do is it's going to cause her to split up into 8 different Morchis, each one with a hat, and the only way to deal with this mechanic is to find the real Morchi and get behind her. If you know where the real Morchi is, but you're on the other side of the arena, if you can get to the halfway mark, get to the edge of the arena, and you will dodge the frontal blast because it is a cone effect. It is not a arena-wide effect. So if you can get halfway to her, get to the edge of the room, and you'll be safe. As for the next mechanic, we have time traps, and what that's going to help you with is the familiar faces. You use the time traps to stop the familiar faces. If they get to you, they will constantly pulse AoE damage on you. You can also use things such as Frost Trap, Frost Nova, Slows, anything like that to help deal with them. They do not spawn very often, but they are a pain in the butt. But as you can see, we quickly find Morchi. Make sure to ping to help your friends get there. You also cannot defeat Morchi while she's in this phase. She will be stuck at 1 HP. You have to wait until after the phase is done. So keep that in mind. It is unfortunate sometimes, but sometimes it happens. And as for the tank mechanic, it's Sandblast. It's just a frontal physical damage effect. Nothing really worrying about it, just don't be in front of the boss. You shouldn't ever be in front of the bosses anyways, because of parry chances. You should always be behind the boss. But after we defeat Morchi, we are making our way to Chrono Lord Deios. He is also a pain in the butt, but I don't believe he is the hardest boss because he has been nerfed. If you have done this dungeon back when it first came out as a mega dungeon, his orb mechanic would one-shot you. In a 23, it might still one-shot you, but in like an 18 or 19, it doesn't actually take you out. Does a significant amount of damage, but you will not die to it. But as for that, we first have to get through 3 units. They are known as the Displaced Marauder and another smallish dragon. Simply put, interrupt the cast that the Marauder does, and then watch for the frontal and AoE effects. But this dungeon is actually really, really well done. The amount of running in between each boss is kind of annoying and dumb, but it happens sometimes, especially when it's a mega dungeon, unfortunately. But I really do like the mechanics in the dungeon. There's something slightly different about them compared to everything else. Especially Morchi, the more problems mechanic is actually a really nice introduction to a different type of mechanic. There was a similar one back in Shadowlands from a raid boss, but I think this one is much cooler. As you can see, Hawk got a little bit too close to the mobs and ended up falling over. But it happens. So here we use a defensive. I try and heal myself while Hawk is running and trying to catch back up. But you typically want to focus down one of the Marauders. But as you can see, we're really bad. I'm really bad at helping with focus effects because I wanted to make sure Circle never got off his cast. But as you can see, they both do AoE, which can get out of hand, and the big guy does a frontal cone as well as Infinite Fury too. So you have to be very, very careful. So making our way to the final boss, we have 14 deaths on a 23. Now I think we actually fail our first attempt, but it happens. The boss does have some difficult mechanics to deal with, but they're not impossible. So once this Infinite Slayer finally falls over, we will make our way to Chrono Lord Deios. Now, he has multiple mechanics, and they are quite devastating sometimes. The first one is going to be his orb mechanic that I mentioned earlier. Basically, he summons 2 orbs, and if they fall at the same time, you will take increased damage from each orb. But if you stand under the orb, it falls slower. So what you have to do is one person stands under one orb while the other person runs out. Once it falls and hits the ground, wait for the debuff to be almost expired and then let the next one fall fast, because he does spawn them in pretty quick intervals, and if you are not watching it, you could end up wiping the group even with doing the mechanics slightly okay, because you stood in the orb too long. So you have to be wary of that. But the second mechanic, especially in this first phase, is going to be the ads that he spawns. When he spawns an ad, it'll run to a specific location and summon a portal that will summon smaller mobs. So just take him out as fast as you can. Then he'll do that twice, and then he'll spawn 2 mobs and fly up into the sky. Once that happens, all you have to do is take out the mobs and he will come down, and then you have to be wary of your location. So here Steven's taking a significant amount of damage, and I think he unexpectedly gets one shot. I could be wrong. He's still fine. Maybe we don't wipe. I'm not sure. I don't remember. But this was done quite a few days ago. But we are going to be taking out... So as you can see, we have mobs. Yeah, they're Steven falls. But if you could see, the orbs right there, they fall. They spawn at very specific locations under one of the players. So you have to be wary of what you are doing. So make sure you don't stand in it too long, or else you could wipe the group. And if you let them both go off at the same time, you will definitely wipe the group. Although earlier I did say it won't kill you entirely, it does bring you to about 20%. So it can cause a significant amount of issues. But we are going to give it try number 2. And this time we will defeat him and still make the timer, which is surprising that you can do a 23 with 20 deaths. But here we take this very, very seriously, as you will be able to tell. But there the orbs spawn, we let one fall as soon as possible. Hubjub sits in the other one, waits for the debuff to fall, and then starts moving out. Just to make sure, and then we have 3 seconds. He's got 3 seconds till he spawns the next set of orbs. And here they come, we move out. Be wary of the location, even though it is in melee, you have to watch your feet. Typically you want one of the range to do the orbs because they don't have to move as much. But here he's spawning another ad. We are going to chase it down and focus it down as well. That way we can cause him to fly into the sky. You also notice we haven't lusted yet, even though it's active. You want to lust in his 3rd phase. That is because that is the kill phase and you want to take him out as fast as possible. But now he is going to summon 2 mobs and fly in the sky, but before he does that he's going to do a tank buster, so if you are the tank, make sure you face him away from the group. I dispelled the one afflicted under the boss because I wasn't sure who was going to be able to get it. But now these guys just do an infinite blast. If you have aggro on it, it will send it at you. If you don't, it'll send it at the tank. It is the way it is. And then all throughout it is putting random debuffs on you at the same time. So here he does his infinite fury, where you want to stack on an edge and make sure you summon it kind of close together. As you can see, me and Hubjub are together and those 3 stand together, just to save room in the whole arena. Now we are going to bloodlust and have fun. So in this phase, all he's going to do is the tank buster, and he's also going to summon orbs. But he's also going to do that infinite corruption again, causing the things on the floor to spawn. So the timer will line up with the orb debuff, so make sure you let that orb fall as fast as possible, so that way the second orb won't fall during it, or I guess won't give you 2 stacks essentially. So it is a very straightforward fight. And then once you get them to 5%, more dragons will come down and help you out. So the fight gets easier and easier as we go on. But as you can see here, we're just staying close to the edge, making sure the puddles get spawned at the edge so we have maximum amount of room. But yeah, that is going to be it for this dungeon. If you've stuck around for the whole series, I've already done all the dungeons. So I'm not sure what we'll do next for these types of videos, but I'll find something. But anyways, thank you very much for watching. Hopefully you enjoyed. Hopefully this helps you out. And I will see you in the next one. Laters.